Hello.
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 Hi, everybody.
Hello.
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 Hi. It feels
Hello.
like everyone went to sleep and after the town hall, and now we're back at it.
Yeah, town hall round 2.
We're going to give it a couple of minutes. Probably start at 5 just to give people joining a bit of a room. Come say hi off the mute or drop it in the chat where you are at this time of the day, or just simply say hello. Feel free to.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, Kyle.
Hi.
Hey, this is Holy Macaroni. I'm not sure if that shows up on here too, but yeah.
We know you as Kyle.
Oh,
Hi, this is New York, Brooklyn, New York.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon from way upstate New York, Plattsburgh, New York, near the Canadian border, where it's always beautiful, always warm, and always welcoming.
Hello, Tommy.
Never been, Tommy, but I should put it on my list.
Please come visit.
Welcome from New England. Land of Moby Dick. My first
The claim to fame.
You have some great background. Is that some sale of sorts?
This is my one and only NFT purchase, Moby Dick.
Nice.
Hi from Toronto in Canada.
Hey, looks awesome, the ship.
So I read some people are in Prague. Hello, Gustavo.
Hey, what's up?
Hey.
Shalom from Tel Aviv, Israel.
Hello, Aaron.
Everyone.
Hey, fra Norge, from Norway.
Hi, Einstein. Awesome. Well, I think we are at 5. Jack, I think you can take it away, and let's have a wonderful session.
Okay, let me just get my screen going. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. So a quick introduction. I'm Jack Briggs. I work at IOG. I'm product marketing lead for Catalyst. So looking at delegation, dReps, and lots of other sort of fun stuff with the Project Catalyst team. Joined today by Abby, product owner of a lot of the technical delivery for delegation. So he's gratefully joined us so that we are able to be walked through some of the journeys via Abby, who's much closer to the details than I am. Also, Harris is here, product lead for Catalyst. So it's great to have him on board as well to walk through this too, if there's any other broader questions as well. We may have Philip as well, who's one of our research leads, joining towards the end if there are any sort of theoretical research-led questions. So there's a structure for today, and we had this call earlier in the morning actually, for those on different time zones. How it worked was a bit different to the first workshop, for those that were on the first workshop. We sort of had moments of questions throughout the presentation, just so that we can capture people's thoughts as we go through the deck. So we'll do the same again, because that worked, I think, really well. And there'll be a decent portion at the end of the call, I'm sure, for more questions. So feel free to drop them into the chat. Danny will capture those in the chat, and I'll talk through the deck and then hand over to Abby shortly. So, number 2. It is a experiment. It's another experiment. Catalyst loves experiments, and this is one of them. It's the first time we're rolling delegation into Project Catalyst, so it's a big news thing. You know, it's not an easy task for us to get this done properly, and we're looking to you guys, the first cohort, to really help us shape the parameters and shape the future of what delegating looks like for Catalyst. So grateful for your time here today as well. And we're still quite far off having delegation ready. It's going to be ready for Fund 10, which is coming actually very soon, but we're still a few months away. So appreciate the early visibility here and feedback as well from you guys. It wouldn't be an experiment without this slide, so I'm going to very quickly read through this. It was heard yesterday. I mean, we hear it every week, but it's good to do it again. So things may break, lack documentation, differ greatly between iterations, disorient, overload, and inspire, with our goal being to provide a safe and lively environment for everybody to explore the highest potential of human collaboration. So on that note, let's look at the agenda. So I'm going to do a brief recap. I'm hoping everyone either joined the first workshop, or if you were new to signing up to be a dRep, have caught the materials via QA Down, and thankfully QA Down are also supporting this workshop too. They'll be providing all the offline materials after this call. It might be 24 hours before things get uploaded, but yeah, very soon they'll be sharing all of this as well. Then I'm going to hand over to Abby to talk through the dRep registration flow. We're going to have a sneak peek to the new voting center that's coming for Fund 10. And I'll quickly recap and a summary. And like I said, there'll be opportunities throughout the presentation to raise your hand, put a question in the chat, and Danny will moderate that. Okay. So in the first workshop, we discussed liquid democracy as a framework, sort of underpinning how we're doing delegation, why delegation is a good thing for Project Catalyst, and how it can work with the technology that we have. That leads on to the second bullet, which I've just talked about. We talked about the dRep role and the expectations, and I'll just sort of recap on this because on the first call we had some questions about the expectations. And there are it's pretty straightforward. There are some minimum expectations that we require of each dRep, and that is to vote on 60 proposals and 20 challenge proposals. And that's the minimum requirement. So obviously we know that most of you here on the call will do far more than that. Once you've completed the minimum requirements, you will be eligible for your reward. And your reward is in proportion to the total delegated stake in that fund round, capped to 1%. I will elaborate on that in a second because it's a bit of a confusing statement. We had to do that a few times this morning. As the dRep rewards are, there's no changes to the dRep rewards. They are fixed at the top earnings you can get are $3,060. And those parameters, and with all of the parameters actually that we're looking through with delegation dReps, these are fluid and up for change. And we're rolling out the delegation parameters for the first round of delegation on the basis that we know this will change and it will evolve based on the community needs and desires. We've done it in a sort of MVP fashion so that we can build upon them. We've obviously got guardrails that are very important to put in place, and the 1% cap is testament to that. And we do have some small changes to direct voting, and mainly that's minimum requirements. So we expect voters to vote directly on at least 30 proposals and 10 challenge proposals. And that's to earn their reward. So if they don't vote on 30 or 10 challenge proposals, they still have their voting power counted, which is very important, but they won't earn voter rewards. And that's to try to incentivize people to delegate, because we think delegation is going to improve outcomes and participation in general. I'll get to that in a second. So what is liquid democracy? A really quick recap, because I know that this has been spoken about a few times. In a very shorthand form, it's a blend of delegative democracy with direct and representative variables in both. And what's great about liquid democracy is how fluid it is. So you have the power of the individual is always a core principle, and being able to recall your voting power at any moment is crucial for the success of most democratic systems, and being able to have that power in your hands at all time. So that's why liquid democracy is such a powerful framework for us, and why we're very excited to bring it to Project Catalyst. So I just wanted to quickly touch on as well some of the benefits to delegation and dReps, and I mentioned a bit of this a few seconds ago. So it does increase voter participation. We think that more proposals and challenges will be voted on, given the fact that there are now minimum requirements, and that dReps are going to be actively interested beyond the normal interest level to vote on more and participate in greater detail than they might do so already. Really importantly, this dReps and delegation works towards bridging the voting power imbalances for lower value balanced wallets. And what I mean by that is, for those ADA holders with less than 10,000 ADA, being able to delegate that voting power to a dRep, and now that dRep may have 1 million ADA as voting power, means their voice is heard a little bit louder than it would have if they directly voted. And that's really important for an ecosystem's health, that more of the participants have their voice heard in more of an equal way. And as a result of all of that, sort of those combinations, we think that decision-making outcomes will be improved. And as I said at the beginning, this is an experiment. We need to see how we can measure those decision-making outcomes. We'll be looking to the community to help us do that. I know we've got a Fund 9 challenge for dReps, so I'm interested to see what comes through that. But yeah, we know that we're going to lean on the community to help us define lots of these things too. And importantly, we're here today. I know that many of you have been engaged throughout the process of when we announced delegation of dRep. We're working together with all the feedback we've been getting on how we communicate better, how we build out the parameters and the processes in place for dReps. So it's all very valuable stuff. And this is another example of that feedback that we're going to take away and hopefully refine and make things even better. So with that, I'll hand over to Abby to talk through dRep registration.
Thanks, Jack. Hi everyone. I'm Abhi. I'm the product owner who is helping build the experience we are going to demo today, and I'm super excited to be presenting it here. Thanks, Jack. I think we could get started. Yeah. So this is the main home page for the dApp that we are building, and here you would see a few basic call to action. Amongst them, the one which will stand out is Connect Wallet. So this is the core of the entire implementation that now, even with a wallet-like web experience, you can do voting and you no longer need to rely on the QR code, PIN code mechanism. This also allows us, of course, to do delegations, etc. But that's one of the core principles. So here, when you drop into the experience first thing you need to do is connect your wallet. Then you can see there is a button there straight down, register as an active voter. That is what you would click to register. And this is what this button replaces the entire QR code, PIN code complexity, and it lets you use a software wallet to connect to the GVC experience. And GVC is acronym, sorry, we call it Governance Voting Center, but it's essentially the entire Catalyst experience. Yeah, I think we could go to the next page. So yeah, so here you can see a few more screenshots. If you scroll through, of course, the content is, the designs are final almost, but content will change and, we'll be tweaking these things. This is still MVP. Next slide. So when you go and click action to become a dRep, this is the page you're brought to, and this is a guided activity which will take you through all the attribution and data points we want to show to a user about a dRep. So it's all very standard stuff, as you can see. And here you have the name, your idea scale username, and an email, and also the ability to hide your email for privacy. Next. Some more information that we would show as part of your profile, and of course we will show you what the profile page will look like. But here you can see some of the things you would have to write for your profile when you're registering, and this might be good to think about already, is your dRep headline, your profile bio, and the contributions to Cardano ecosystem. Lastly are the tags and interests. This we will try to align with the idea scale tags so that we have a good alignment between tagged proposals and your interests as a dRep, so that the information is more cohesive. And of course, feedback is welcome about any and every such thing. Yeah, next. Here you can see some of the initial socials we thought might be interesting for a delegator or a passive voter to look or review for a public dRep. We are open to adding more as and when required, but we thought this would be a good start. Lastly, terms and conditions apply. And this completes the registration process and submits your profile to be, I think, go through KYC and proof of life. So I'll stop there for a second to pause. Any questions so far?
Yeah, we have a number of them in the chat, so maybe we can take it from the top, which were slightly, some of them related to the previous part of the presentation, but I think we can wrap it up as well. So I'll start with the first one. So what happens if delegation vote and the user vote differs? If a user both can delegate vote, but also should be voting himself, I assume user's vote will then override delegation vote.
I guess it depends on your last action before snapshot, because it's either or, right? Either you are delegating or you are registered as an active voter. So it's a or scenario in my mind.
And just to clarify, Abhi, this may also be speaking about if you delegate your voting power to a dRep, dRep votes in a certain way on a specific proposal using your voting power, but then you want it to change individually as a voter and answer on a specific proposal that the dRep already cast a vote. Is this the case for the first iteration? And if not, is this the case for the future iteration?
Yeah, so certainly not for the first iteration, but I think it would be good to understand why you would want to override a vote like that, and if what are those cases where this would be useful. But yeah, we can double click on that.
Yes, I'll read another question. I'll get to you, Zoe, if that's okay. The next question was, can a dRep delegate their own voting power to another dRep?
No, because that breaks the purpose of the dRep. So in short answer, no.
Okay, thank you. Zoe?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to, just because you now kind of confirmed it, that voters have to choose between delegating and voting by themselves. And I am 95% sure that last time we discussed that voters can choose by percentages. And both now the voting center design you showed and what you and your last statement, Abhi, were that would not be like combined for a voter, that they have to decide.
Yeah, so I think when you're delegating, you cannot partially delegate, right? So either you delegate 100% to a maximum of 10 reps, or you vote yourself. There is no partial delegation currently in that sense. You delegate your entire voting power. And that's a very good point, and that might be something which we do in the future, is we allow for you to partially delegate your voting power and keep some of your voting power.
Yeah, and there is a workaround. Sorry, Abhi.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there is a workaround, Zoe, actually, which is by having two wallets, and you use one wallet with the amount of data that you want to use for yourself, and then delegating the other amount. So there's a sort of workaround, but it's not clean, as Abhi's talking about.
Okay, and can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. My other question would be, let's say I'm a dRep, and let's imagine I don't have another wallet that I registered differently. My personal voting power will, as this dRep, would then just be that. So I cannot delegate my own voting power that I have in my wallet to somebody else and also vote as a dRep with the votes that are delegated to me? Or
You can, but you would have two sets of wallets then, but you would still need to have at least 500 ADA to qualify to vote. But yes, you could do that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zoe. And just so that, because that's on topic, Tommy mentioned, it was said before that you could delegate 50% to one dRep, 30% to another, and 20% to a third. So let's just make sure we have the methodology correct. Is that the case, Abhi, or is there a change?
Yes. And maybe we are getting a bit ahead and we should probably follow the slides because all these questions will get answered.
All right. Okay. So let's wait for that one. Let me double click on a couple of other questions up in the chat. There was, will a downvote count as a vote? Yes, I assume that's
yes.
Okay. That's just like a yes vote. And then there are many voices against downvoting. Why is this just adopted to dReps without having the conversation? Here, probably it'd be worth noting that it's currently following the original Treasury paper implementation with a three-way stage, yes, no, and abstain. That is not to say that I couldn't actually change in the future for different voting plans or implementations, but currently it just follows the same pathway of implementation that the Treasury paper outlines. Then there was another question, what wallets are supported? Eternal ? I can also take that one. Essentially, we are actively working with all the community wallets that have expressed interest to implement the delegation. Eternal is one of them. Typhoon is another one who is included in those conversations. We have Yoroi included in the conversations, and also Flint and a couple of others, though it will really depend at the end of the day which wallet actually implements this satisfactorily at the time of the implementation and launching the voting center. So we're hoping that as many wallets as possibly can correctly implement this, but obviously we are working jointly to make sure that it actually happens in the first place. And just to highlight, Catalyst is being built as wallet agnostic so that any community wallet, if they implement correctly the pathways, can participate and enable that connectivity through the dApp connector from their user interface directly.
Yeah, I'll just point out that Lace will also be included, just to throw that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where it gets interesting that, you know, there could be community run experiences as well. Anyone can build a voting center.
Okay. Another one was, if a dRep fails to vote for the minimum amount of proposals, do the delegators receive rewards?
Yes. The dRep will not receive their rewards, but the delegators will have their voting power counted and they will be rewarded. The dReps will not be.
And then there is a follow-up question. This delegation is Catalyst specific and separate from the Ouroboros, correct? ?
Yeah, this is Catalyst specific, I believe.
And then will there be a support for SPOs and using the command line for delegating their voting power? ?
I think there is certainly some tooling work required there, which we want to take up, but may not be for MVP, but stay tuned. We are working on it.
Yeah, and to double click on that, we are working very closely with another community member you may be familiar with, Martin Lang from Atada team, that manages a lot of stake pool operator scripts, especially also if you are a stake pool operator, you'll likely use the CLI voting tools that he manages in his library and builds the guidelines and you know how it's done. and he's also plugged into the stream. So we'll be consulting with him along the way, what is the best way and how to incorporate the CLI commands from the stake pool operator's perspective to make sure that we don't miss anything on that part as well. And then there was a suggestion, I think, about the, I guess, how the tags are going to be composed. Maybe a question that I'll turn it into a question. Will there be an opportunity to set the custom tags or set what kind of tags they'll be available for dReps?
Not at launch for MVP, but maybe in the future.
All right. So I would suggest we pause with the questions. I still keep taking notes of them, so not to worry. And let's proceed a little bit with the presentation.
Kyle just put his hand up, so just wondering if.
Sorry, I haven't seen him. All right, so let's take Kyle's question. And then again, taking all the questions on the notes on the side, we'll just advance a little bit with the presentation and then come back to the rest of them for sure. Kyle, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for pausing to entertain me for a moment. I appreciate that. And to expand on that question, and as a scenario, in my 13 years cybersecurity job, what we do a lot is we'll have two different, maybe a survey or two different sets of tags. One is like primary roles, like what cybersecurity products do you know that we sell? And then ancillary, then you'll have like a secondary or ancillary or supporting tags where it's, hey, what other things you know that might help you along with your job? Like, do you know Linux? Do you know Mac? Do you know Python? Do you know whatever it is, right? So that was kind of my suggestion, to like have the primary things that it looks like you guys want to align it with, like maybe the categories or something with the proposals, but then have a secondary thing where people can add in all their ancillary skills, right? Because as a dRep, I want people to know that I have that kind of background I just mentioned, but as a delegator, I will want to know, specifically what type of skills they have. Like if they're voting on, a category, getting groups involved, like are they good at marketing, right? And so forth and so forth. That's kind of what I was meaning. But thanks.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And this is like the first iteration, and we'll certainly want to improve. And this feedback is extremely valuable because this is not the final. This is just the start.
Sure, understood. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So Abby, the next slide is a preview of what the dRep dashboard will look like. So your dashboard as a dRep.
Yeah. So this is at a high level, all the information you would be able to see. And it's not really that complex, but you will get high level information about your voting power, etc., along with the phases and where we are in that phase, as well as your public wallet address, which is verifiable and is used with your profile. And this is also where you can start interacting with your profile. I think we can go to the next slide.
Cool, and it's now into the voting center. It's a sneak peek. So you're the first group that are going to get a view of this. So yeah, take it away, Abby.
Yeah, this has been really exciting. And, the landing page is the same because it's the same experience, right? It's a unified experience, but if we keep going ahead, you see, of course, the main call to action there, delegate to vote. And this is where you get to see the list of dReps who you can pick and delegate from. And this list is, of course, based on the data we would capture from you during registration. It's relatively simple, I think, simple design, but would love some feedback. We are, of course, always open to iterations.
I think a key point, actually, Dan, Abby, that you raised on the earlier call is that the list here, the search results are randomized. So there's no sort of hierarchy.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Thanks. Yeah, if you would notice, the default sort is random, and oversaturated dReps are filtered out from the random from the initial result. So we cannot stop you from wasting your voting power, but we can help you. We'll make it a little harder. That's the point. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I see Tommy. Hey, Tommy. So I see a question there about oversaturated dReps. You mean the definition itself of oversaturated dReps? So it's basically if you get delegated more than 1%, you are oversaturated, 1% of the voting power. And that's what an oversaturated dRep is. Jack, maybe if you would like to add something more there.
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah, thanks, Abby. Actually, there is something I wanted to raise. So there's a little nuance with how saturation and the rewards are going to be calculated, and I'll try to do this in a very clear way. I did this a couple of times this morning, so bear with me. We have the voting cap that dReps will have is 1%, as Abby mentioned, and that's based on the total voting stake, the total amount of ADA used to vote in a particular fund. Now, your rewards are also capped at the 1%, so you'll get the maximum reward as a dRep if you have 1% of the total delegated stake. And there's two different numbers. So if we look at a really simplified way, we have 1 billion ADA used as total voting stake, so the total amount of ADA used in a fund, but only 100 million of that was delegated. So the 1% voting power influence you have is 10 million ADA, but you only need to have 1 million ADA to earn your full rewards because it's 1% of 100 million rather than 1% of a billion. So hopefully that's the clearest way I can put it.
Well,
so in a sense,
another way, another way to think about it is just two different parameters. One is your voting power, the other is your rewards. They are both separate numbers, but they are both 1%. That's a coincidence and not connected, if that makes sense.
And I think it's also to recognize that this is the first time we're doing delegation, and to have 1% of the total voting power is quite a significant amount of ADA that you need to receive as delegation, which may mean that your rewards are quite low if we based your rewards on that parameter. So by using it on the total delegated stake, which we know will be a smaller number, always likely to be a smaller number, there is more chance of the first dReps getting a reward that is fair value for your effort and time. And again, back to my very early point at the beginning of the presentation, all of these parameters are up for grabs. In the future, the community, you guys will decide on what kind of parameters you want to adjust based on lots of different things that will happen over the time that we see. Yeah. Awesome. So Abby, I've skipped a slide onto this one, but if there's any other questions, Danny, we can take them as well.
Yeah, we have quite a few in the backlog, so let's make a way through them a little bit. What is the timeline for approving the applications?
Do you mean what do you mean by application?
So I would assume in the first part of the presentation, we've shown the registration, and then there was a screen where reviewing your application. So I would assume that that's the point referred to it.
So yeah, we're targeting voting in Fund 10. So therefore, there would have to be a bit of an earlier onboarding to make sure that the dReps, all you guys are listed here, with enough time to get that delegation ahead of the vote for Fund 10.
Thank you, Jack. Going back to the rewards, are the rewards for individuals the same, whether they delegate or choose to vote individually?
The rewards will be the same, but your voting power will have greater influence if you delegate. So your voice is heard louder if you delegate. 99 times out of 100.
Thank you. Then there was another question related to the tag, but we can quickly address as well. What does the tag Defi cover? No Webster's definition. Does it indicate NFTs, CNFTs, etc.? And I assume that speaks to some shared understanding so that people know how to use respective tags and maybe some explanations. What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually, Danny. Thanks, whoever said that. It's a pretty good one. We will elaborate on the definitions of those categories and tags. Abby, I'll work with you on what those final tags are, and then we can define those properly for people to have a steer on where they should go. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep, absolutely.
The next question was, dRep votes are public, right? Question mark.
Abby, do you want to take the on-chain? I can take the other part.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question there.
So dRep votes, are they public or private?
dRep votes are public by design, I believe.
I'll add a little bit there. So when you're actually accepting the privacy policy and the terms and conditions on actually signing up as a dRep, you're basically accepting the fact that your voting from that wallet will be public during the time that you are a dRep, and that is by design.
And there's a secondary thing. And then the secondary thing, just to add to that, that part of the minimum expectations for you as a dRep to vote on 60 proposals and 20 challenge proposals is that you publicly provide rationale for the way you voted. And that'll be available to your people that delegate to you, but also more broadly as well to the community. So there's sort of two transparency parts to this, on-chain and off-chain, essentially.
Thank you. And maybe I'll add to it. The votes are made public post-execution and post-tallying, because there's two different voting plans, the ones that the dReps will be using and the other one the individual direct voters will be using. And once the voting is complete, then the dRep voting plan is made public. And at that point, the votes become a matter of the public record. Then there's a question. I am a dRep, my personal voting power, question mark. I would assume maybe the relationship, like if I'm a dRep, what happens, or how do I account for my own wallet voting power, if I understood the question correctly.
Yeah, and we saw that in one of the slides where you saw the breakdown between staked, delegated, and that's, I think, if we can just go back to that slide. Yeah. So this is breaking down the staked and the delegated from the point of view of the dRep. So for you.
Awesome, thank you. Going back to the wallet integrations, are the wallet integration requirements open source? Question mark.
Yeah, so it'll be a SIP. I believe it's SIP 62, which will finalize. And obviously, we are already working with the wallets and we're working with them to come up with the SIP. There's a lot of work going on around the background, but yes, it'll be publicly available. Anyone can build a similar experience as long as they follow, the same principles and best practices.
Thank you. Another one, is it possible to have whale dReps that get max reward even though no one delegates to them? Question mark.
I don't see why not. I don't think there's any system artificial restriction put.
Yeah, that's correct. There's no technical limitations for being, if you're a whale and you want to become a dRep, you could have two wallets, you register one wallet as a dRep, you delegate via your other wallet to yourself, and now you're oversaturated. So you will get rewarded based on 1%, but you might, depending on how much data you have, how big a whale you are, you may lose some of your voting influence because your voting influence is capped to 1%. So there is a risk that whales will need to judge, but there is a way of them. They still have to meet the minimum requirements, though, of voting on 60 proposals and 20 challenge proposals. So in a sense, we would be paying them to work, which is not a bad thing. And they're still capped on voting influence, so which is also very important.
Thank you, Jack. I'll read out one more question and I'll get back to you, Zoe. Following the previous question, won't your own voting power be separated from the ones accumulated by your delegators? If so, how? I guess more on to speaking the distinction between, again, your voting power versus what the delegators are delegating to you as a dRep.
Yeah, I don't think there's any distinction at that point, right? Your voting power is your voting power, and that's that.
Yeah.
All right. Zoe?
You said something very interesting about how public the votes are and when they are publicized. And could you please elaborate? Because if I didn't misunderstand, you mentioned kind of 2 stages of voting.
So the vote itself is one period, but as you know, casting votes is private currently, so you don't know what's the progress. You don't know if like the group A is winning, or the group B is winning, or the group C is winning. And essentially the casting of the votes period is private, but then post the vote, how the dReps have voted will be unlocked, and that will become a matter of a public record. So you as a delegator then can verify what choices they've made, and then through the through their profiles, perhaps finding out why specifically these choices were made in the first place.
Oh, okay. And then there's not like a second such voting process. It's just these 2 stages, one's private submission and then publicizing, and not like first the dReps vote and their vote is public and then the others vote and this is private.
Currently, it's all simultaneous, so everybody will be casting their votes at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. All right, I'm going to try another question. In case of the failure by the dRep, how will the rewards for delegators be calculated? For example, if the dRep only votes for 30 proposals and 0 challenges, what happens?
So the dRep will not be rewarded, but the voting power will still count, and the delegatees, the active voters, will get rewarded still. So they're not penalized. The dRep is the only one that's penalized.
Thank you, Jack. And then are there plans to track wallet voting history with project status of yes, voted for projects or other such metrics? Did projects succeed and so on?
Absolutely. And we have a lot of plans in the future, and voting history is one of them. Obviously, it will be an opt-in, where you will have the ability to choose whether you want your voting history to be available to you, and only then it becomes available. But yes, those are all in our plans, and we hope to show in a future workshop like this.
Thank you. Another one, voter rewards are always tied to the voting power snapshot taken. Therefore, it should not matter whether you keep all eggs in one dRep basket or split it among many. At the end of the day, your voting rewards are still the same, right? Question mark.
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Then there was another one. I think you addressed it. What about the ordering? What do you see people? How do they see the first ordering of the dReps?
Yeah, it's randomized, and no oversaturated dReps will be shown initially.
Thank you. I'll read one more question and I'll get back to you, Sebastian. Just a moment. How many dReps are needed? How many hours a day, a week it could take to accomplish the job? Question mark.
So it's a great question, actually. And I think it'll be more for some and less for others. And it depends on the current audience that you may have that people may already trust you and know you already in the community, and they'll delegate immediately to you without having to think twice. There'll be some that need to advertise a bit more and say, hey, don't forget to delegate to me, just similar to stake pools. I can see imagine it to be quite similar. In terms of, that's to get your delegation. In terms of actually the work when you are a dRep, because the rationale of your voting history will be public, so you will be required to put in a small section on each way you voted out of the 60. So if we think about that piece of work, if it might take you 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes to fill in a short rationale about the way you voted times 60, and then you've also have the voting itself, which can take X amount of minutes depending on how much you read of the proposal and how much you research on it and all of this kind of stuff. We imagine it to be obviously concentrated in the voting part. There'll be sort of 2 phases I can imagine. One being, hey, delegate to me. And the second one is, okay, now I'm going to work. And that feels like the two phases, but generally speaking, intensive for maybe a month of each fund round. That's me loosely speaking. So it might be different. It will be different for everybody.
Thank you, Jack. Sebastian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank
please.
you. What I'm trying to get at with my questions about the failure of the dRep is the rewards of the delegators tied to the performance of the dRep. For example, the opposite scenario, the dRep goes above and beyond, they vote for 300 proposals, all of the challenges. Will that increase the reward of the delegators? Will that create a competition between the dReps to who's doing most voting, right, for their delegators, and create some sort of, I don't know, hostile ambient or something like that between dReps?
Yeah, it's a good question. We haven't looked at sort of scaling rewards based on performance. There are just minimum requirements that we ask of dReps initially. Now, those minimum requirements could be 200, it doesn't have to be 60. We've settled on 60 based on what we think the first cohort can do based on the sort of crude maths that I just mentioned. And given the fact this is a new process and an experiment, that we don't want to set the bar extremely high or extremely low. So we've sort of settled on this number that is very arbitrary, that is open to suggestions and feedback moving forward. So your ideas there are equally valid to air and debate and possibly change the parameters in the future. So yeah, we can take that on board and sort of in some ways hand it back to the community to decide that for themselves.
Awesome.
Hopefully that answers your question. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Might I suggest we take a pause from the questions? I still keep track of them, and let's advance with the presentation a little bit, and then we get back to Q&A right at the end of it.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Abby, I'm just going to land on this one again, which is where we last left off.
Yeah, thanks. So here, one more thing interesting you can see is on the right is the vote delegation model, which sort of tells you your current state of delegation as a end user. And this is just information which is useful and allows them to start again interacting with their delegation cart, let's say. And we could go to the next screen. So this is what the basic initial profile looks like for a dRep. And this is what delegators and passive voters will see. And this is where we will show all the information that we've captured from you during the registration process. And you can see this is exactly how the end user will add a dRep to their delegation cart. Next, just another view. And here now you can see the delegation state has changed. Now you have 2 delegations showing for this user. All right, next. And now here the user is able to manage the voting power for each of the dReps that they have in their delegation card. And here the criteria is that it should add up to 100, right? Not less, not more. And the user will be able to confirm the delegation.
Yeah. Thanks, Abby. So Danny, I'll just quickly summarize what we've seen today. I know that everyone's just seen it, but I'll quickly summarize it anyway. So we think the registering of the dRep is pretty fast. It's quite easy. There is a proof of life review that we are working through on sort of how that will work and look. We know that dReps profiles will be public and searchable via the new voting center. A dRep will have a vanity handle, which makes it easier for them to share their profile. So similar to LinkedIn, if you can share your LinkedIn profile, relatively straightforward, and that'll be the same for all of you here. Voters who choose to delegate can confirm their delegation or will confirm their delegation through the voting center. And post snapshot, we've seen dReps will have all personal and delegated voting power added together and then available to use as a combined value when voting opens. Important to note as well from the first workshop, the delegation values do reset after each round, so per fund. So after fund 10, your delegation values, whatever you canvassed and got, will go back to 0. Now, again, that's a parameter that is totally up for grabs. So we're open to feedback and suggestions. Initially, for the experiment, we wanted to have strong enough safeguards in there to avoid any power concentration and essentially the stake and forget ideology, which is we see with stateful operators. And the voting center, so it's a new fast way to delegate and become a dRep. We're going to have the DApp, so you're able to connect your wallet through mobile and desktop experiences. When voting becomes available through the voting center, there won't be a need for a QR or PIN code. So I know that a few people will be quite excited about that. The Catalyst voting app will still be available for the direct voting experience. So yeah, that's the content today. And Danny, more questions if there are any? Sure there are.
Yeah, plenty. So let's continue with them. Did we already talk about structured data or API access? And I think Harris also mentioned, so maybe I'll give him a moment.
Yeah, the entire voting center is actually powered by open APIs, which we're intending to publish those APIs and make them available. So a lot of the capability, the lookups of dReps, access to this information will all be made via open APIs.
Thank you, Harris.
Yes, is that on the same timeline as the UI here, or is that a future thing?
No, this UI will be powered by those APIs that we will be publishing.
Right, so will the API be published around the same time the UI is published, or is that a future date?
Yeah, so right now the plan is to release together because we are releasing at MVP state. But yeah, the plan is to release it all together with fund 10 timing alignment.
All right, thank you. Next one, where was I? If is a dRep voting power shown to the delegators? And I think that some of the slides we just shown demonstrate that, but if you can double click on it.
Yeah, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah. Sorry.
So yes, it will be available, and that's how you sort of identify how saturated that dRep is, how many people have delegated to that person already. So that'll all be available. It obviously depends on timing because you may be the first one to delegate some voting power or one of the very early ones, and it will change as we get closer to the snapshot moment where the total delegated amount is confirmed.
Yeah, that's a good call out. This is a evolving state, and the final snapshot and the continuous snapshot, the data will vary as people are interacting with the system.
Thank you, Abhi. And there is a related question. If a dRep delegation goes over 1%, can people still delegate to them? And is the 1% of all ADA or 1% of voting ADA?
So the first part, yes, as in they will be, we will not stop them, but we will give you a warning that you are delegating to someone who's already oversaturated, and you will lose your voting rewards as a result if you still want to delegate. But we can't stop you, and we shouldn't stop you, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Abby. Zoe, I'll get back to you. I'll read one more question. It was mentioned previously that dReps in the top 150 of voting power would receive rewards. Is this in addition to or separate from the direct voting requirements?
It is separate. So yeah, direct voting is just different. It's separate, yeah.
Awesome. That's a quick answer, Jack. Zoe?
So I wonder about about the fact that oversaturated dReps are not shown, because I think I remember from the last workshop that I think it was you, Jack, said that the votes still get counted, no matter what's saturated and oversaturated. But just the rewards get slashed with, yeah, when you get to these 100%, when you get to the 100% rewards, you won't get more. So I kind of wonder why the oversaturated dReps are not shown, because that would kind of, yeah, for me, it doesn't make full sense. Also thinking that oversaturated stake pools are always shown, and it's your personal decision whether you want to so go into it or not.
Yeah, and then there's two things. Sorry, Abby, go on. You go.
Okay, thanks. So one thing that I just want to call out, this is just initially what happens when you land. After that, if you change your filter, you will immediately start seeing oversaturated dReps as well. So we are not trying to hide the information. We are just making it harder for users to waste their voting rewards, right?
Abby, just to expand a bit on that. So that's why there was two things to your question, Zoe, which is voting influence and voting power. So a dRep cannot have more than 1% voting power as well as rewards. So I apologize if that didn't come across clearly in the first workshop, but that's the very important safeguards that we have in place to prevent power concentration among a certain group of individuals or limited individuals. So yeah, 1%, and that's why Abby's sort of getting at it's a wasted vote, not just for rewards, but also for your voting power. You know, you might as well vote directly or delegate someone else.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Zoe. Joanna?
Hello. I just want to clarify one thing. So is it that every wallet can choose up to delegate their voting power to 10 different dReps, or like their entire voting power, or is it that they have to allocate their voting power across 10 different dReps?
So
like,
they
give 100% for 10 different dReps, or?
Correct. You cannot partially delegate your voting power. So when you delegate all your voting power, and you can delegate to up to 10 dReps.
But then doesn't that mean that, let's say, 2 different dReps voted on the same proposal, then you're doubling my voting power, whereas now I can only vote on one proposal, like 100%.
But you have a weight attached to your voting power, right? If you remember from our screenshot, there's a percentage slider. It adds up to 100. We don't duplicate your voting power if you assign to.
Gotcha. Okay.
It should still add up to the same.
Yeah, I see where you were going with the question, Joanna. So yeah, the slider will just move dynamically. It will say you're over delegated because you've got 110% in the way that you've done the sliders, and you have to adjust that before you can confirm. But yeah, you're voting, you might want to give 90% to one dRep and 10% to another.
Okay.
That's totally your prerogative.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And then maybe just confirming, there was a specific question. Once a dRep is saturated, what prevents more people from delegating to this dRep? And I think we've answered nothing specifically, but if we want to reiterate the point, feel free to.
Yeah, so there will be a warning, and we can't stop them, but there will be a warning to warn them that they are wasting their voting rewards.
Thank you, Abhi. Now we're going to switch a little bit and ask about the record. So what about past votes of the dRep wallet? Question mark. Is it public or private?
Before they became a dRep or after Fund 10?
let's answer both.
So I'll take the first one, and you can take the second one. So before you become a dRep, one of the requirements that we set out early was that you needed to have participated in a previous fund as a voter. And Fund 9 could be that vote, Fund 8 could also be that vote. Now, there was a good question we had earlier this morning around, well, if I link my wallet, there's a sort of more publicly available balance that I have of holding of ADA, and I might not want to share how much ADA I have publicly because you've now got the profile with your public wallet address linked. So if that were the case for some of you here, then you would create a new wallet just as a dRep. That would need to be fixed and remain static to preserve your voting history as a dRep. And you could either delegate your voting power from your existing wallet to you as a dRep, or not at all. Now, how we will validate if you have voted in Fund 9 or Fund 8 or a previous fund will be in the proof of life review, which will be a private meeting, a private work stream that we're going to need to define properly as a team before we do this. But that'll be where you validate your previous history as within Catalyst.
Thank you, Jack.
And then Abby, the second question was around preserving it after Fund. How does the dRep link after Fund 10? So Fund 11.
Yeah, so we want to be able to let users see your dReps voting history, as well as the user choose to opt in and record their own voting history for their own purposes. So that's all stuff we are thinking about for the future post Fund 10 in a future iteration, having those capabilities.
Thanks, Abby. Let's double click on the whale question just to also eliminate any doubt. Whales can have multiple wallets and get rewarded multiple times, ? So how does the rewarding work?
If it's voter rewards, then it would be the same as if they voted with one wallet with all their ADA in it, because that's how voter rewards are calculated. If they were to become a dRep or more than one dRep, they would be filtered out part of the proof of life. So we'd understand that, this whale has asked to be 5 dReps. That's obvious. So we would bar that from happening. I think I hopefully covered the answer.
I think so. Thank you. This is an interesting one. Will it be frowned upon that dReps make public what they plan to vote?
I think depends on how you look at it. I think that the way we've gone from this is around transparency and openness. There needs to be a level of awareness to how you as a dRep sort of suggested that you would vote, because in your bio, for example, you could put that I'm going to vote for projects in Brazil because I want to see Cardano grow in Brazil and I want to see XYZ. Now you've made that very publicly obvious in your profile, and you've had a community of people that have delegated to you based on that. Now, if you decided to vote for everything that was in Argentina, there could be some problems with your people that delegate to you because you promised them Brazil. I'm speaking very crudely with examples, but that will be that will come part of the rationale where you say why you voted a certain way, and that'll be available to the people that delegate to you. So it's all about transparency. It's about conflicts of interest, people being aware of can they trust you as a dRep to use their voting power in the accordance of how you promote yourself. So essentially, it's holding yourself to quite a high standard of public office in some respect.
Thank you for that. Then a little bit about the results. The first one, I think we attached an answer to it, but for delegated wallet addresses, are these made public with dRep votes after the tally? If you are voting directly, your vote is kept private. If you've delegated, you're not casting the vote. The dRep is casting the vote on your behalf, and that one is made public. And then following the question with the results, is there a plan to be more transparent in the voting results? ? A dashboard that shows all projects and their upvotes and downvotes, and maybe also the wallets how do we know that our votes and dReps were actually counted? Shouldn't this be automized and automized and then perhaps even in real time showing ?
Yeah, so for sure, I think we need to provide better tooling to enable more transparency, and that's where we're hoping the Open API can set the starting point of this journey. And of course, we are looking for feedback and improvements there. We are currently looking to build more transparency into future versions where there's more information available.
I think you muted yourself by accident, Abhi.
Sorry about that. Yeah, and the past history of the votes that have been cast will all become available, hopefully in a cohesive environment, which will include the experience you saw today. So yes, absolutely, that's our goal, to be able to provide you with the tools for you to verify the results yourself.
Thank you, Abhi. Another question, can a voter whale register 10 wallet addresses, vote for and saturate 10 different dReps and get 10x rewards?
No.
And that's because the voter rewards are based on the total ADA you have. So if you voted with all of your ADA or split it into 10, the actual amount can change.
Thank you. There was a question about whether the slides will be posted post the QA DAO Gitbook soon. Yes, all of these recordings will be shared with the QA DAO team. Please do allow them time to process it so they can then publish it and it will be distributed publicly. So absolutely, if you missed anything or if you wanted to have a brief overview of all the questions and everything that's been asked, just like they did the great, phenomenal work for the first set of workshops, they will be also doing it for the current set of workshops as well. Another question, will voting tools be updated with less friction too? Point number 1, vote/delegate with multiple wallets. Point number 2, create a voting list easier, select multiple proposals, sortable, smart query, full stop.
Yeah, short answer is yes. We are all looking at building all these functionalities, but for front end, we are not, but we have batch voting and advanced filters and many more things we have planned, but we want to be realistic and make sure that we are focusing on getting a usable experience ready for front end. And, and once it's out there, once we start gathering that feedback, we are absolutely going to iterate with the community.
Thank you, Abhi. And just to rewind back a question, Jack, would you like to reiterate or rephrase the answer about the rewards and the whales 10 wallets?
Just repeat that again. Sorry, I'm just responding to one in the chat.
Yeah, so that's the one that was asked about the 10 wallet question. Maybe we can answer it a bit in a different way.
Yeah, no, she made a good point. I'm just looking at that again. So the whale would have a reduction in voting rewards if they oversaturated dRep. So let's say one whale has 2% voting power and they delegate to dRep, or they just slash their voting rewards in half. So they could decide to have 2 wallets, do 1% to one, 1% to another, and get their full reward. They could equally get their full reward if they just voted directly without using a dRep. So there isn't any actual increase in monetary gain, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Next one. Keeping in mind the minimum number of PA and VPA reviews desired, what are number of dRep votes per proposal desired? What is the dRep budget?
In terms of rewards for dReps, Tony?
Yeah, so maybe that's actually a two-part question. So the first one, knowing that there's some like minimum numbers of PA/VPA reviews on the proposal side of the things, we're targeting at minimum 3, stretch target 5. What are the number of dRep votes per proposal desired?
That's a good question, actually. It's not a parameter that we've discussed. And I don't think, I think for the first iteration, talking about sort of like what is success, right? What does a successful delegation look like? Is it that 20% of all voting stake was delegated? I think to me that'd be probably quite a good success metric for the first round of delegation. You know, taking my example of 1 billion total ADA and 200 million was delegated, well, that's pretty good, especially in the first round. But these KPIs are sort of, well, we don't know how really people are going to perform and behave until we've rolled it out. And I think that's where we'll be leading to the community to also define some of these metrics as well. And what does a healthy ecosystem look like, including delegation? So I'm hoping to see some of these cool stuff that's coming through Fund 9 Challenge for dReps.
Awesome. And then the second part was, what is the dRep budget? And in here, I'll just ask you if you can also frame it within the lenses of denomination changes, but like holistically, what is the budget for dReps?
The budget of dReps, the amount of where the rewards come from, Danny?
Yes, and how much they would be getting.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so the pot of rewards for dReps will be coming out of the voter reward pot. So we have a percentage of each fund that goes to voter rewards, and dReps will be coming out of that percentage. And the total amount that dRep can earn currently will be $3,060. And actually, I can't quite remember why we settled on $3,060. I think there's some percentage maths that go with the total fund pot versus the percentage of how much is available to voter rewards. So excuse me on not knowing the exact reason why I think it's that. So again, these kind of rewards are, you know, if for example, we think there's a lot of people are doing so much work and the rewards are actually too hard to achieve or they were too easy to achieve, these are all things that we can discuss as we move forward.
Yeah, but Jack, I posted that question on the budget and the number of voters, trying to get to a number of dReps that you want. And the rewards are only a part of the budget. You're putting in man hours to develop a software program, the API, whatever you want to call it. You have your man hours in doing these workshops. You know, why is Cardano, the foundation, whomever, so interested in liquid democracy that you're putting in how much money in order to see that this thing's working? And then we're going to involve the community. And it's not just the $3,080 or $3.3050 times 150 dReps. I'm just looking as a business person, as an investor. What's the total budget that you guys have earmarked for this project?
Yes, it's a great question, Tommy, actually. And I don't have typically I don't have those internal numbers to hand. And I think it speaks to maybe the broader sort of plan that we have for Cardano, you know, for governance for Cardano. The delegation is important for it. We believe that. We will see that through the experiment, and we're hopefully correct. And hopefully the value of that comes through the fact that IOG are developing Cardano. And that's part of our instruction, our sort of contract for Cardano is to develop it and build it. And it's part of that. But it's a good question on total numbers. I don't have them to hand. Yeah, sorry. That's a good question.
Yeah, and I have it noted. So thank you, Tommy. Another one, is it possible to have a dead voting power? dReps that do not review and voters who delegated to this dRep but do not switch since they still get rewarded? Question mark.
That's another great question. I think there would be, sadly, a mechanism where the delegators that delegated to a very bad dRep, so a dRep that didn't do anything, didn't cast one vote. Because that's all that needs to happen. As a direct voter, you only need to cast one vote to get your full voting reward. Now, with a dRep, if they don't cast any voting reward, any vote, sorry, do the delegators get the reward? And I'm not sure they do. I think in that example, they wouldn't get it. Now, I'll take that back, Danny, the question to confirm. It's a good one. I think it's just a mechanic rather than a philosophical rule, or do you know what I mean?
And just to step back a bit, you mentioned what is the minimum requirement for the direct voters in order to be eligible for the voting rewards?
Yeah, so there is a need for direct voting in Fund 10 to vote on 30 proposals and 10 challenge proposals as a minimum requirement to earn your voter rewards. If you vote on half of those, that's okay still. Your voting power will still count. That's really important. You're not going to be excluded from voting. If you just want to, if there's one challenge you want to see through or one proposal because you haven't got time to do 30, then your voting power will still count. You just won't get any voter rewards. Which is why we would encourage those types of voters that don't have the time or for whatever reason to delegate their voting power.
And I'll just tag the one from the chat, but if you do one dRep, you get the full reward.
Yes, you could delegate to one dRep and the dRep behave as normal, as expected. You would get you don't need to delegate 10. It's totally up to you. If I understood that correctly.
I think so. If not, we can clarify in the chat as well. Another one, will dRep wallets be kept private?
No, the dReps wallet is public and we show it in the dRep profile.
And I'll double click on this question with another. Can SSI, self-sovereign identity, be used as an experiment for this?
Short answer, yes, and we've already talked about it. Not for MVP, however, but absolutely. And I think Harris will also agree this is certainly something we are actively thinking about.
Yes, I think Harris is no longer with us. He had a commitment, but there's also another concurrent effort that's currently underway to pilot SSI implementation with the VPA cohort and how they are legitimized in the process. So more on that a little bit later down the line in the Catalyst always. All right, next question. Will there be any sort of restriction voting on a proposal that is submitted by dRep or more of a personal ethics thing, similar to a morning question? Jack?
Sorry, Danny, I need to have that rephrased a little bit.
No problem. So can you vote on your own proposal as a dRep?
Okay. So yeah, we had this morning and we had it actually in the first workshop and I did a classic U-turn in that workshop where I first said, no, you can't vote on your own proposals. That's ridiculous. And then someone came up with a really good example of why you should be able to do that. And we spoke with the research team at IOG and we thought, yeah, that makes sense. So yes, you can vote on your own proposals. The key here, though, is to have conflicts of interest declared and your intentions very open and transparent through your profile, so that those that are delegating to you know exactly your intentions. Just with my example around, I'm going to vote for everything in Brazil. Well, you could have 5 proposals in Brazil, that dRep, which means that you're going to give yourself 5 votes. You should be making that very clear and honest to those people that are delegating to you. If they choose to delegate to you, well, that's their prerogative and they've been informed of their choice before they made it. So that's the stance that we've taken today. But again, these things are always, we have to see how behavior is on that.
Thank you, Jack. Should be straightforward. Every wallet can delegate to 10 different dReps.
Yep.
Can you maybe outline just a couple of different instances what they could
every
look like?
wallet, maybe that's if you have a wallet, doesn't matter what the wallet provider is, right? Anyone can delegate, but of course the wallet needs to support the new SIP 62 feature, which will be coming out with Fund 10. And that's where we said earlier, we are working with a couple of the wallets and the community wallets, if that answered the question.
Thank you, Abhi. If not, let's follow up in the chat. Then the next one. So is there a queue that is recorded once one delegates to a dRep? The question mark. It remembers who delegated first and who delegated last. So if I delegate when saturated and then some people leave, would I be the first in line to be included in rewards? Question mark.
So it all works at snapshot, right? The state that is finally, which calculates the voting power is the snapshot. So whatever was in the past or may happen in the future does not apply. What we will be able to show you is hopefully a continuous snapshot so that you know what your current voting power is, and delegators know what your current voting power is, but it'll still might be, 24-hour delayed information. But ultimately, the calculations happen at snapshot.
All right, thank you, Abi. Just a flag in the sand. I'm gonna read out 4 questions that I've captured, and I think that should exhaust for today. I would appreciate not to drop any more questions, just in the interest of the time. Obviously, we can always continue the conversation, but I also want to be mindful of everybody's time that is quite precious that is on this call. So thank you for being patient. Last 4 questions, and we're going to wrap it up today, if that's okay with everyone. So next question, continuing the whale dreams. If I create 100 different wallets and hire 100 dudes and dudettes to do the dRepping for me, they do the proof of life, but essentially it's one big team against the world. What are the implications? Question mark.
Yeah, this is Tommy, right? I did respond to this question, and I would like Tommy to sort of elaborate a little bit on his example because it's a good one. And in short, the answer would be that the frontman dRep would have to identify themselves during proof of life and have control of that wallet. So they'd have to have control of that proportion of a whale's wallet. So that whale would therefore have to trust that frontman, which is probably unlikely that would happen. I appreciate the edge cases, and we should always look at edge cases because edge cases are where attacks happen. So, Tommy, you made a comment after that around they'd be paid by themselves. They'd be paid $3,000 as a max reward, and the whale wouldn't have to do anything to pay them. Is there something you could elaborate a little bit more on that? It can be in the chat, or we can talk offline if you like as well.
All right, I think he can't cooking. Bon appetit. No problem. The question's noted, so we're going to definitely give it a thought and capture it so that we can have a better discussion about it as well. No problem. Thank you for the question, Tommy. Another one. Are we not using Catalyst voting apps anymore and instead using the new dashboard via browser to do the registration as active voter / dRep ? And do we vote using this new dashboard in Fund 10 ?
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions there just to break them out. So our initial goal and target as of now is to deliver for dReps a full experience where they can look at proposals, vote, as well as manage their profile. And for passive voters or delegators to be able to go in there and be able to find dReps and be able to let them delegate to them, sorry. The third element is the active voter. Now, here our hope is that also with Fund 10, we would have the capability. However, Catalyst voting app and QR and PIN code will still remain the primary voting method for majority of the Catalyst users for Fund 10. The exceptions are dReps, you, and those who are brave enough to risk a beta app, which is we are releasing as an MVP, right? And this is where we don't want to stop anyone artificially from using the app. We will not hide the app. but we are not recommending general public use for Fund 10, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you, Abhi. And that's probably the key element in that message, that for Fund 10, the primary focus is to deliver the dRep functionality, and then to phase it out into Fund 11, where more complete combined user experience for everyone could then use and leverage a voting center itself as a full alternative, perhaps, to the QR and PIN code user flow we are accustomed to today. Thank you, Abhi. And the last two questions, almost there. And this one also says, one last question from me is on API. Is there protection mechanism in place against blocking voting registrations on the API, such as DDoS attack and such? Question mark.
All APIs that we build, regardless of its purpose and use, all go through standard API best practices, which includes protecting against DDoS. That's extremely standard. And absolutely, yes, we will be trying to ensure all our APIs are secure. And that's very core. And, you know, APIs are not, are much more stable technology than even blockchain. So I think we have much more well-defined security best practices there.
Aysten, did you want to double click on it, or that's good? I think you asked. Yeah, you're happy? All right. No problem. And then the last one, question number 85 of this wonderful workshop day, that includes the morning session as well. If wallets are static and public, what if a wallet gets compromised in some way? Question mark. Is there a workaround? Question mark.
Wallet gets compromised. That's a very, I would say that's not a GVC specific problem, right? Any dApp will have this problem where a user could have compromised their wallet and they have exposed now the dApp's permissions through their wallet. So the immediate thing to do is to disconnect your wallet, to revoke your permissions as a user from the dApp. And that's the first thing you should do, regardless of the dApp and not just GVC, right? Beyond that, if there is urgency, of course, you know, we are all on the same Discords and Twitters. And if there is something urgent that needs to happen, you know, we can certainly entertain that as an exception. But as a user, it's always a best practice that you make sure you are aware of which dApps you're authorizing your wallet, right? And then if you are sure you are not using that dApp ever again in the future, just disconnect your wallet, right? There's no need to give permission indefinitely to a dApp.
All right. Thank you, Abhi. Well, that put the cherry on top of the cake. I know Tommy pasted in the chat as well. I recognize that, but I'll let Jack follow up with you separately for the conversation, just so that.
Yeah. Thanks, Tommy. Yeah, that's thanks for the explanation. I'm going to copy that across. I know you're doing that, Danny, as well, but I'll just put that away.
Yes, please. All right. Well, that's the hard part, easy part. I hope the question, the grilling and everything was insightful for everyone. It was, I think, equally insightful for me, not only to recap everything that we're working on, but also like look at it from the perspective of other people and those who will be interacting. Has anyone any last comments, remarks? How did you find today's session? Any shout outs, anything else that we've missed and is critical to know? Please do so now. Otherwise, we'll be slowly reeling towards the
Very
end.
well moderated, very well run, great guest speakers, a lot of information, and it was handled professionally. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate that, Tommy. QA DAO are going to document all of this for everybody offline. Discord's available, of course, to put in some questions that you'll sleep on and wake up tomorrow having. So yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a nice session. Thank you. I'm super excited for the dRep profiles and for the voting center. Super cool stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. it's very exciting to be finally be able to share. I've also been waiting for this day, so I'm very excited. And, you know, I've been in Catalyst for longer than I've been at IOG. So for me, this is a giant leap forward.
Yeah, thank you for all the hard work. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.